I went into national service at the age of 18 and did a couple of years down there, and I was based at Aldershot, where there just happened to be two organs, one a Compton and one a 7-rank Wurlitzer next door in the ABC cinema at Aldershot. And I very quickly got myself ensconced into playing for children's matinees and also one or two beauty pageants down there, which as you can imagine the soldiers used to enjoy going along to see. The style I had was rather unusual in that because my practice time was mostly in the very, very early hours. I used to get in there at 6 o'clock with the cleaners of the theatre, and that was the time I was allowed to play the organ. So you can imagine you don't go in and disturb the cleaners by playing, you know, loud sounds and making too much noise. So it was generally a case of being down in the orchestra pit and experimenting with different sounds, mostly individual ranks of the pipes. Each row of pipes has got its own character, and I really enjoyed playing quietly and getting used to this wonderful new machine, because right up to that point I'd just been a pianist. So it was a very simply registered style, and mainly tunes that I needed to play for the children to sing along to later on in the morning. 1962, and we heard that the organ in the Granada Wandsworth Road had been damaged by water. Just about the worst thing to happen to any organ. And as it turned out, it was only the console that had been damaged and had more or less fallen apart in the orchestra pit. But we went along and learnt that the insurance company were not going to pay for the instrument. They were simply going to sell it to the first person who came along, and we just happened to be that person. So we acquired an instrument that we had no idea where we were going to put at the time. And we started by simply going along there every Sunday morning and working on the iron staircase, started cleaning pipes and various sections of the organ. And eventually we thought we might put it in the garage at the bottom of our terraced house. But we very quickly came to the conclusion it'd be far better if we moved from the terraced house and had a house with a garage alongside that we could make soundproof, and then turn it into something within the house. So we managed to find a little piece of land in Ealing that was free, and instead of one garage on the side of the living room, we decided to put two. One for the car, the other one for all the pipes connected to the console. So it was quite early on in the 60s that we got involved in the business of saving these organs. The Empire organ, I happened to read in the Daily Telegraph that the Empire Theatre was going to close within a month, and that immediately triggered in my mind, you know, what on earth's going to happen to the fine Wurlitzer that was there. And it's quite a long story to tell, because the first thing I wanted to try and achieve was to hear the organ in concert, because up to that time the organ was only being played to accompany Ben-Hur. And I spoke to the Theatre Organ Club and managed to persuade them that the organ should be heard, because they'd had this picture of this console on the headed notepaper that I'd always received from the Theatre Organ Club, and it had fascinated me that this particular design of console looked so much superior to anything else I'd seen. It looked quite sophisticated and substantial, but we'd always been told that we couldn't get in there because it was the theatre that royal premieres were held at, and it was far too important a place to have an organ concert. However, I sort of rang the manager of the theatre and said to him, you know, that I would love to experience an organ concert there. And he said, well, I don't see why not. tell your club to get in touch with me, which they did straight away. And within a week, we'd organised for the members of the organ club to go along there. And I took my tape recorder, and we were about to have this concert with Jackie Brown and George Blackmore, when I had a shout up from the orchestra pits, "Well, if you want to play this organ, you better come down now and you can play the audience in." And I rushed downstairs from the circle where I was setting up my equipment, and slid over the orchestra rail straight onto this bench, and using only the stops that I was used to using at the Ritz Aldershot Wurlitzer, I just had this incredible experience of this rolling big sound descending on me from on high. And it was just one of those love affair things, you know, you just instantly fall in love with it, and you just feel you want to preserve it, you want to be with it, you want to keep it. And not long after the concert finished, I got in touch with the management to ask about the disposal of the instrument. Cutting a long story short, we purchased it and managed just about to store it at my father's home, in part of the garage, under the beds, behind the wardrobes, anywhere we could squeeze a section of it, we did. We had a good chunk of it up in the attic roof space, and we also built, out of the shutter frames of the organ, an outbuilding that we housed the 16-foot pipes in. So looking back on it, it was impossible, but I suppose youth and enthusiasm was on our side, and my parents cooperated with me fully, and we kept it there for 2 years, ultimately designing this house here with the lounge that we're sitting in at the moment, and effectively a very large garage the other side of the wall to my left, and that's a soundproof room in which all the pipes and percussions are. So it's been very successful, given me a great deal of joy, and people seem to like it when they come here and experience it, and I'm rather surprised that it doesn't blow them out of the front door, being such a large organ. But the substantial brick walls and a concrete ceiling keep the entire sound from reaching anybody outside. So it's all contained within the fabric of the building. It's always a pleasure to have people here and hear how they get on with it for the first time. These organs do sound and feel very different in other people's hands, and it's always fascinating to see what happens. I've been very much affected by the great precision and originality of George Wright's musical arrangements and performance. And so when we had the opportunity of presenting him in concert at the State Theatre Kilburn, I was fortunate enough to work with him on the organ for a week, and during that time took him around various sites, and he wanted to come here and see the organ he'd heard about, and we had a couple of wonderful days here, during which he said, "Don't change a thing." He said, if it was my organ, I wouldn't change a thing. There were one or two particular ranks of pipes he was hoping he might get his hands on, but he understood, of course, that I wanted to keep the whole thing together here. He was a great guy, very easy to deal with, and very encouraging to me, and he would answer any question at all that I put to him. So that was a wonderful experience. During my national service, really, I was going into my billet at 10 o'clock. I was sneaking off from my desk duties and sneaking up to the little radio we had by the side of the bed and listening to the 10 o'clock half-hour organ broadcast, which, as you say, often came from different theatres. And in all honesty, the different organs I heard, some I liked, some I didn't. But there was definitely something different and something very special and unique and entertaining that always came out of the organ in the Tower Ballroom, Blackpool. And of course that was largely due to the unique style that Reginald Dixon developed for dancing, and the acoustics of that particular building. So it's meant a lot to me to hear that sound and be entertained. It was the entertainment factor that was so intriguing. It wasn't a very large organ, but it had a really, really interesting and say entertaining sound that suited dance music. And Reg put it over with a wonderful voice. That always intrigued me. And he obviously managed to get the audience in the palm of his hand every time he was at the console. So a unique personality who many of us owe considerable amount to, because if it weren't for that, I think the future of the organ from those days would have been far less than it has been. So I remember the broadcasts extremely well, but I think probably more than that, I remember going with our church choir before I went into national service, and I took a bus journey up there. We took a whole coachload of the choir up there, and I do remember sitting up in the balcony, as I think people like Nigel Ogden and Phil Kelsall and a few others did, and looking over the balcony in the seat closest to the console, and watching the way he used the swell pedals and the alternate manual work that he did, and just being mesmerized by the physical energy that he put into it, and the way that he coupled music together that the public at large just loved to hear. And it was an object lesson in how to entertain. I don't know where he learnt it from. Perhaps it was just natural to him, but they came up with an answer to making the ballroom commercially very successful. So a marvellous man.